G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and with the Heresy drop site preview coming up at a very convenient time of 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, we'll be all over that. What I want to do was I want to talk about my fears going into this, as well as some more thoughts on the box set. So, this one. So, with this box set, and having had time to digest it now, since we did the live stream a few hours after we saw this, I have some thoughts. So, obviously, I'm not a fan of the Dreadnought. And the reason I'm not a fan of it isn't because of the sculpt or anything like that. It's because I see no point gameplay-wise for the Dreadnought. This will reiterate on some points we did on the stream, but essentially, for long-range shooting, you have the Deredeo. For long-range shooting at a really points-efficient price, you have the box Dreadnought, the Castaferrum. If you want, you can also have the Leviathan with a full gun loadout, which is very efficient, but it's shorter range, or the Contemptor Dreadnought, which is a pretty good all-rounder. If you want a Dreadnought that's a mix of close combat ability and firepower, both the Leviathan and the Contemptor do that quite well. If you want a Dreadnought which is all about heavy ability to brawl, that is the Leviathan, and to a lesser degree is Contemptors, because two Contemptors are statistically points more efficient than a Leviathan is. And I just don't see the point, therefore, in adding another Dreadnought into the lineup beyond the company wants to do so to milk nostalgia points, which I think most people can agree with. These are pretty logical basis for reservations on the model. The Sat-9 Praetor, beyond having a hammer, which is bigger than most Marines are, like torsos, comically huge, larger than a Praetor, we're talking a model here who is a Marine character. And he's going to be on a base that's larger than a Primarch's. He's going to be larger than a Primarch, most likely, as well. He's at least on par for size. This doesn't sound like the sort of unit that appeals to me in that regard. So, if you're going to make Sat-9 this huge, they seem to me more like the Space Marine Centurion war suits. You'd be familiar with the Centurion Devastators and the Assault Centurions, where it's a Marine wearing a cosmetic oversuit, which gives him larger bulk, larger mass, in order to carry around heavier firepower. It seems more like that sort of a suit to me. Like, this Marine is not just wearing this thing, like his joints wouldn't work and in way worse ways than other Terminator suits. This would just be physically impossible. So it must be some sort of outer suit that he's wearing. Therefore, I say, well, why has it got a Praetor? You know, a Praetor wouldn't be blinged up and wearing this sort of armor. It'd be so inefficient in battle. If you were to do something unique and interesting with that Praetor, like give him a bunch of firepower and stuff, that would work really, really well. The other character in the box has a comically oversized mace. They just can't help themselves with comically oversized weapons on characters. I will learn to deal with that in time. I am not there yet, so give me a break in the comments. But from characters like that Iron Warrior's Warsmith we got recently, who's got a hammerhead that's 3 times the size of his Primarchs, you know, these things are so ludicrous, I can't take them seriously, because this universe is supposed to be, or at least has been to this point, a very grounded and realistic take on the Warhammer universe. It's meant to be taken a bit more seriously. Like, what if this was a real history? Was the way that it was always portrayed in the Forge World books. Now it's falling into that comical Warcraftian sort of styling of oversized crap. And of course, there's that autocannon platform in the background, which seems to have essentially 4 accelerator autocannons. Looks like it's a quad. One accelerator quad autocannon platform is what I believe it says on the box. Okay, cool. So, looking at this right now, what I think to myself is, what would I change in this set? And funny enough, I think there's a few very small changes you can make to turn this into a really, really amazing set. It won't be, because they've obviously made it already. But If you swapped out that Sat-9 Dreadnought for a Leviathan, if you took out the Sat-9 Praetor and put in just the Age of Darkness box set Praetor, one with the axe, or the Betrayal at Kelth Cataphracti Praetor, and then change the autocannon battery to either like Contemptor or preferably Cataphracti Terminator Squad, this would be a really, really good box set. Like, this would be a lot of fun. I don't know that the disintegrator weapons are necessarily what I would be putting in there. I'd probably just be putting the special or heavy weapon sprues in there and letting people make of it what they will, and it would be an amazing starter box. Please, your thoughts, comments below, etc. So, yeah. As it stands, though, clearly a new edition. I mean, it says Age of Darkness, 3rd edition rulebook. 3rd edition rulebook. It says it on the screen. What concerns me now, we should probably get into. So, what concerns me here is that with the preview of New Edition, they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because as a community, there are certain things we've held long true. And I've spoken at length about how the system desperately was in need of an FAQ and errata. FAQ, I just say it for short. I know that upsets some people. They want to say, no, it's errata. FAQ is frequently asked questions. Yeah. I get it. But you know what I mean. So, the community as a whole, and I can't speak for every single person out there, but definitely by far the wide opinion that I've heard, how's that sound, is essentially that, well, this edition has issues, and many of these issues have not been addressed. So going to 3rd edition, are they going to address those issues, or are they going to reinvent the wheel? Because they have a horrible habit at Games Workshop of having an edition that mostly sort of works, and then altering it, and altering it, and altering it. There was that episode of The Simpsons, you probably all don't remember it anymore. It was an old show, it was very funny once upon a time. They only ever made 10 seasons of it. And on The Simpsons, Marge buys a Chanel dress. It's this pink dress with like black trim on it, right? Very Emperor's Children. And in order to impress the socialites down at the local country club, she wears this thing over and over because it's her fancy dress. It's her rich person's dress that she found on an amazing discount. And she wears it over and over again. But because other people are teasing her for wearing the same thing over and over again, she starts modifying it. She sews it and she re-sews it and just turns it into this abomination. Then she gets teased more for it. And then she eventually destroys it, trying to modify it, okay? I feel like that's the way Games Workshop handles so many of the rules of their game systems. You look at Heresy 1, you go, there's no major issues with the core rules there that needed rectification for 2.0. What there was a slight imbalance in power between some of the legions, a few of the units needed an FAQing, but otherwise it was in a mostly sound place. The community had done some really, really good FAQ and erratas for it to bring that system to a really, really, really well-balanced place. As in, not balanced like the most perfectly balanced game you've ever played in your life, but more just a, hey, you know what? I feel like the only thing holding me back in my list creation is my imagination. Like, I can take whatever I want and I'm going to have a blast with it, okay? That was what Heresy 1 felt like. Then we swap to Heresy 2. When we get to Heresy 2, they start just adding new features, like reactions, for example, or movement values on different kits. And it starts adding this... it adds things that no one asked for. Now, you can argue whether or not you like those things being in the game. Many people like having reactions because they want to be able to do something during the other person's turn. They don't like the idea of static turns where they just sit there twiddling their thumbs while the other person spends 20 minutes moving all their stuff. I understand this, but I think most people can agree it was botched in the implementation. So if we treated this like any other thing, like whether it was a video game or hell, let's treat it like a science experiment. If someone brings out something and it's completely botched, like someone creates a new self-driving car and they implement it everywhere, and then it turns out that like these things just have a habit of just taking a 90 degrees turn and just ploughing into oncoming traffic, at the drop of the hat. You wouldn't be like, that's acceptable, that's fine. Granted, it's a crazy example because, people will die. They're not going to die playing Heresy, I hope. But same sort of thing here. If you're playing a game system and you add a new game mechanic, you need to make sure that mechanic works. And it works as intended. When you have things like augury scanners, for example, and you slap them on dozens of units, and these units have insane amounts of firepower, like Legion Heavy Support Squads, and now they're getting free intercept reactions, well, you've just broken on your very first book of the game system before you've introduced any other game mechanics. You've just broken that game mechanic. Okay? I think we can all be mature adults about this and admit that, yep, that was completely botched up. Same thing with movement values. You go, well, none of the missions were adjusted for deployment types to take into account the fact that things will move faster and move slower now because of these abilities. They changed things like the weapon skill chart, which just meant that it is now so punishing to be just a single point of weapon skill different that units, like, I understand the mentality here, right? And you gotta take a step back and look at it like the 10,000 foot view sometimes. And the 10,000 foot view, you're like, veteran units have weapon skill 5. That's the distinguishing feature. But they don't feel that much better for having weapon skill 5 on the tabletop. So, how can we modify these units in such a way that that feels more impactful? That is most likely what the designers of the rules thought when they made weapon skill 5 so powerful, so all-encompassing for this edition of the game. But the downside is, I don't think anyone actually properly tested this, I should rephrase that. We know that people play-tested this, and we also know that Games Workshop just ignored the feedback, which again shows fundamental flaws at conceptual level. And when they tested out the weapon skill 5, what they found, the playtesters, and then of course us who are actually playing the game, is that, yeah, it is really, really busted if you have weapon skill 4 units and you're going up against that. And to an extra extent, if you're playing an army with mostly weapon skill 3 units, looking at like Solar Auxilia, Imperialis Militia, and you go up against a weapon skill 4 army, you're just bashing your head against the wall. So the game is encouraging you to stay away from melee combat, because it's like you're just outmatched. And if you're going to go into melee combat, there are certain units which now become just nigh on invincible juggernauts. Think Terminators, right? Terminators with Thunderhammers. If you can get weapon skill 5, Thunderhammer armed Terminators, you are bringing units to the battle which are insanely killy. Because every time they land a blow, you're pretty much guaranteed to get something through that's going to be instant death against most things. It's just such a force multiplier. Same as when it comes to heavy support. Yeah, you can take missile launchers, but for like just a few points more, you could take las cannons, which are stronger than missile launchers in every conceivable way except for shooting as flyers, where they'll be snap shooting, whereas missiles might use flak missiles. But unlike flak missiles, las cannons can just outright crump a flyer because they can roll explodes results. And they've got Sunder, so they're re-rolling their damage results. And therefore, these things are really efficient. Unlike missiles, they have the armor penetration, being AP2, to bypass the saves of those horrible 2-wound units like Terminators that are wielding Thunderhammers. So you straight away found a way around that particular weapon type. You've invalidated a weapon beyond the rule of cool factor just because of new game mechanics that you're implementing into this system. Because it's like, those Terminators are really deadly. If someone deep strikes those Terminators near my army, they will mince through me. How am I going to deal with it? Missile launchers? No. Las cannons? Yes. With augury scanner. Done. Like, it just becomes very rock, paper, scissors in that regard. And that is not a good thing. And I'm terrified at the prospect of a 3.0 coming out, and the game system follows this same trend. And to reinforce the point, and it's a point I've made many times before, is they do not have a good track record in the writing team at Games Workshop of being able to follow through and show lessons learned. They do not seem to look at the mistakes made during this edition and just rectify those. Instead, it's like they feel like that's not enough to sell us a new system. They can't just sell us a new rulebook, which is just this rulebook, but fixed. What they have to do is sell us a new rulebook where they're like, here is some mechanic we have bastardized in order to sell it to you as a new thing. And I very much feel that is what they'll do with 3.0. I can't prove this to people. Of course, there are rumors, plenty of rumors around. There's rumors about everything. But it just feels like this is the general trend with what they've done. And you can say, well, let's just wait and see, Macca. And you'd be right to say that. But also, I would be right to point out that we have a company that has over 40 years of established rules writing. And this has been their trend for that entire duration. So, what would be different today? What would be different if they wrote the rules now? Nothing to me says that they've learned their lesson, because we only need to look back a few months at the previous publications for the game system to see the quality of rules writing that's coming out. It is clearly not there. The people writing these rules, and I'm not saying this to insult them, but they're not doing a good job of it. Now, you can say there are many reasons why that might be. I think personally that there are issues when it comes to a certain level of, I won't say bias, but it's a certain level of we know better than you do, you know, and the community screams loudly for things. We go, yes, we want to have this edition, but fix this, and this. They don't address it. It's just so contemptuous, I feel, for the community, and that's why, you know, I'll put out videos and I'm like, this is really contemptuous behavior. And then the community gets, you know, half of people say in the video, yeah, you're dead right, that is contemptuous. And the other half say, you never put out positive content or something to that effect. You know, fine. I also point out to people like, you know, I don't care if the company exists to make money. You know, you need to look after your best interest as the person purchasing these things. So fuck what the company wants when it comes to making money. What do you want? Because the way that relationships with people and business are supposed to work is they bring out products that you want in the way that you want. And they're trading you their goods or services for your income. Okay? They don't just get to pick, we want to make this, now pay us regardless of whether or not you like it. Okay? That's the government that does that, not private businesses, right? Or maybe like evil medicinal companies. Speaking of which, right, people will always point out in the comments how Games Workshop's sole obligation is to make money for shareholders. Many of you would be familiar with the United Healthcare and Luigi Mangione, how he murdered the CEO of that company. There's actually a lawsuit going on right now by shareholders of United Healthcare alleging that they voided their fiduciary responsibility. That means they did things which are going to make it harder for the company to make money going forward for the shareholders. And in what way, you might ask? Well, because they have ruined their relationship with their customers through their egregious monetization. And these are the words that are used in the lawsuit, I should add. They're like, you can't treat the customers like crap. And just because they are paying you now does not mean that your business model is sustainable for us as shareholders in the long term. And I thought that was very interesting to note, because for years I've been pointing this out at Games Workshop and saying, like, look, they are making money today, but they are doing it at the expense of community goodwill in the long term. I also have said for years, despite people who want to say that, you know, negative content sells on YouTube, it does not, I assure you, that I don't want them to fail as a company, because I have had 30 years of enjoyment from their products. I am the last of my original friends group who started playing in the early 90s and mid 90s. I'm the last of them. The others have left, you know, because of their business practices. And, you know, I want people going forward. I mean, for myself, I'm nearing the end of my hobby career, realistically. You know, I'm pushing 40. I am, at some point, going to say, no, it's not for me anymore. I've got to, move on to the other passions I have in life, which is typically, smoking meats and World War history, right? That's what all middle-aged men get into, that and buying a fast car. But I want others to have that same joy, that same pleasure from the game. I don't want it to be a pump and dump hobby where people buy in for 5 minutes because Games Workshop decided that it wasn't worth sustaining the hobby for those people. It's only worth for them that they make money in the here and now. I don't want that, So, yeah, those are some fears and concerns I have for the edition. Predominantly, really want to reinforce this point. My biggest fears relate to them just absolutely messing up the rules for their system, because they will feel that they need to do something different to what they've done before, and that they want to bring mechanics in line with other game systems. And the problem with that is we bought into this game because it was not those other game systems. If I wanted to play those other game systems, I would. Don't try and tell me that what you're producing is what I want. Listen to what I have to say. If you're a good company, you will. Okay? Listen to what your community says to you that they want. I think that the customers have actually been very straightforward. This is not one of those cases where people like to say in the comments, the game, no matter what happens, you'll never be happy. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I didn't have many gripes about Heresy 1 if you go back to Heresy 1. Most of my complaints leveled at Games Workshop back in the Heresy 1 days, the videos are on the channel still, revolved around their treatment of especially Xenos factions in 40k. And towards the end of Heresy 1, just the glut of last chance to buy that occurred, where they would just rip hundreds of models down overnight from the web store with no basically recourse, no way for you to get in there and go like, well, this is what I wanted. It was either like pony up the money today and buy it, or in 2 days' time, it's gone and you never get that chance from us again. Thankfully, other casters stepped in. And of course, the way that they were handling FAQs, they basically went radio silent as soon as Book 9 dropped. In fact, the treatment we got after Book 9 and the silent gap between that and Heresy 2.0 is the same silent gap we're in now. They dropped the Martian Civil War, dusted their hands off, said, yep, job well done, without addressing any of our concerns, and now it's on to Heresy 3.0. And I think that is a really, really, really poor approach for sustainable long-term for the game, because this game is competing more and more and more with 40k, because you keep making it more and more like 40k, and people are unhappy with the current state of 40k, they migrate over to 30k. There'll probably be that influx of players again after 3.0 drops, where they come in and they're like, yeah, all is well. That surge of players, but I don't think it'll be sustained at all. So I have a lot of reservations there, and look, you can call me all the names you like in the world. I don't mind. You can say I'm salty, you can say I'm only ever negative, but it's like, what evidence can you point to? Because I think I've pointed to a fair amount of evidence that what I'm saying is likely wrong. Okay? Yes, it's conjecture. We're guessing what is going to happen in the future right now. I'm guessing. But like I said, I've got decades and decades and decades of evidence to draw upon. So unless you think they've suddenly changed their ways as a company in how they market, how they release, I don't think that it's going to change anytime soon. Again, look at the Heresy website. The majority of people that I polled the other night, out of 400 respondees over like 20 minutes, not even, out of that, 75% said they felt that the website was condescending, okay? Because it's making light of the fact, or talking down to us about the fact we're asking for details on the new edition, that we're in limbo and we're worried that our collection is going to be invalidated, that anything we're working on currently is going to be invalidated. We don't want to therefore invest in new things. These are all legitimate concerns. I feel they are very legitimate concerns, in fact. That's why I try and raise them on behalf of what I've perceived to be the community. And rather than actually addressing that, they just want to make fun of, Valrak-type rumour mongering, which is not helpful to anyone. In fact, I think it's very reductive to the whole process, because Well, we don't need that. What we need is reassurance. And we're getting our reassurance from things like leaks and not from them. There is no point in having this, oh, we'll give you a preview when we feel like it. That is marketing people who don't understand their community taking charge of things. And I don't care for it. And I know the majority of you don't care for it because that's what the polling said. I still wouldn't say it's 75% realistically. It's probably closer to 50-50 because there's always going to be a confirmation bias on our channel. I get that. But yeah, sometimes humor doesn't hit home, and I felt that it was one of those times. But anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. This video has already gone on too long. I'll catch you on the next one.